That's me. I grew up in the 90s. I think the mushroom haircut is quite a giveaway. But that's me in the 90s. I grew up collecting tea. So friends and family, whoever would travel well, I would ask them to bring back tea as a souvenir for me. So I started collecting teas from China, Japan, Sri Lanka, of course India, and I stored them in my father's old trunk. When I visited one of the tea gardens in India, I found out that 90% of the quality tea in India gets exported, then it comes back into India, repackaged, and we buy them at 10x the price here. So I think my journey started off with just as a hobby. I mean, we didn't have internet back in the 90s, so we had real hobbies, and collecting tea was one of them. And I stayed in this beautiful home in Sri Lanka, and I tracked down this tea master who's from Japan, and I wrote to him 2 years in a row that I'd like to come and study tea, and he never bothered to reply. The third year, I wrote like a personal essay for almost like a university application on why I'd like to study tea professionally. And that's my teacher now, Kumikawa, and that's my colleague Masato. And I finally went down to Sri Lanka to study tea professionally. And I specialized in tea blending. And that's just one of a regular day in tea tasting. So, like if you're an athlete, you run every day. If you're a singer, you do your riyaz every day. So if you're a tea taster, that's what you do every day. We had like a table of like 100 cups of teas, and we studied and tasted teas, low region, high region, and that's one of the trips we took in Sri Lanka with my Japanese tea master. And back then in 2010, Sri Lanka was still not a very like a stable country, and I was advised against traveling alone. But I was quite curious to learn about tea, because in India, I can maybe give you 3 cups of tea now, and I don't know how many will be able to identify which one is an Assam, Darjeeling, or a Nilgiri. So I think that curiosity drove me to Sri Lanka. And just like wine, there is an education in tea, and that's how we also spit our teas. During the year that I spent in Sri Lanka, I also traveled and volunteered at this elephant orphanage in Pinnawala in Sri Lanka. And I think that now that I look back and connect the dots, was in some way an inspiration to the tea trunk logo that it exists today. We have an elephant in our logo. And traveling to these tea gardens is when I realized that I'd love to make these teas available in India. Like it's so easy to find the best Darjeeling tea in Harrods in London, but you cannot buy a very exquisite first flush in India easily. So that became one of the driving forces to start Tea Trunk. I traveled to various tea gardens, this being one of them, and initial days started making smaller batch blends. I initially didn't even have a road map for a business. My idea was to set up a tea school. So this is one of the TEDx events in Bombay where I had 2 bins. If you like the taste of the tea one, throw it in that bin. If you like the taste of tea two, throw it in this bin. Like these were literally my initial experiments of how I started blending tea. I just wanted to get feedback and get more people to try these teas. And I don't know how many of you would recognize, we had a night market at the night market in Goa, that we had a little stall. And that's literally how we began. We just set up a stall to see where we can, what kind of an interest we can get with Tea Trunk. I also made a lot of programs and had a chance to represent Indian tea at global conferences, this being one of them. Yes, there is something called as a plague tea, and we should talk about that later. But during that time, I became the brand ambassador for Tea Board of India and had a chance to represent Indian tea at pretty much the Olympics of tea. That's my hand-drawn logo for Tea Trunk, and that's exactly how we began, with just literally a hand-drawing illustration. And I think all of these conferences that I traveled to, this was one of the most prominent one, which is the World Tea Expo, where I spoke about the different types of chais of India. I mean, I know every one of you have your own special recipe of chai, but even cultural influences of chai, cultural recipes of chai like noon chai, Suleimani chai. We spoke a lot about those, and that's essentially where Tea Trunk began in 2013. And during this entire journey, I think one of the most important things for me has been building the right team. I strongly believe that entrepreneurship is a team sport. And I think during these travels, I got a chance to meet Ruskin Bond, my personal hero, and I think that was one of the highlights for me, where we crafted a custom tea blend for him with herbs from Landor, where Ruskin Bond resides, and this is like a special tea for him. This right here is our tea room at Fontainish in Panjim, which we just opened 9 months ago. Again, this is just a project for our, office, where our team was working remotely now, and we wanted to find a space for, people to come and experience tea. And that's a small little place in Fontainish in Panjim. And I think what's coming back to my journey of being an entrepreneur, which began from not having an intention to build a business. I am now a decade into running Tea Trunk, and I think the most important learning for me has been that, courage is not the absence of fear. Like, there were so many times I didn't think I could do it, or I wasn't sure, talking about something as simple as tea in terms of global audiences, but I think you still go ahead and do it even if you're scared. And I think that's what's been my journey, and that's been the guiding force in my journey. Thank you so much.